smart, elucidating, sometimes irreverent, always opinionated commentary from our panel of analysts. Let's look back at the week that was and what a week it was in politics, social issues and current events, including, of course, this firing we've just been talking about with immediate effect of Nigeria's military chiefs. And with me in the studio are Honorable Zachary Mohammed, who was the chairman of the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs and member Constitution Review Committee in the 7th National Assembly. Nwagwu, who is the Executive Director, Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, or PAACA, and was more recently chairman of the group Partners for Electoral Reform, and of course Arise news analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmoud Jega. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me start with you, Zachary Mohammed. Any thoughts on why this reshuffle of the top military brass has taken place now?
Yeah, as a student of defense and security studies, I just know that Mr. President is within his behest to hire and fire. And of course, I'm sure he's not unconnected with the recent news we're hearing that some senior officers were involved in, they were actually not satisfied with the run of things. And of course, they said there was a coup. So it's all connected with that. That's, I mean, every administration wants to do self-preservation. And I'm sure that in that direction, the president decides to at least reshuffle his security team so that he can face the challenges ahead.
Right. Okay. Let me come to you, Mahmoud Jega. Is there any way that we can objectively say that this Tinubu administration's fight against insecurity has been a success? And to that extent, how do we relate that to this reshuffle of the top military brass?
Well, you see, this change that the president has done after 2.5 years in office at least corrects one issue when the public was complaining during the Buhari regime that he did not change service chiefs for so many years, and that caused stagnation, and so many courses below the service chiefs had to retire without realizing their own career fulfillment. So this one at least corrects that impression. Even though when you think about it, the president also extended the tenure of, for example, the Controller General of Customs, the Inspector General of Police, and only yesterday the Surveyor General of the Federation, and you would have thought that the same principle applies, because those extensions will cause some officers to reach retirement age without. But the most striking feature is that these changes came just when in the last 1 week there have been all these rumors about a possible coup. Defense headquarters denied it and said the officers they committed some misconduct and are going to face court-martial. But unfortunately, in the minds of most Nigerians, these changes kind of confirm that yes, something must have been seriously amiss for the service chiefs to be swept aside, and even retaining the Chief of Defense Intelligence, because the reports we had were that he was central to the arrest of these officers and their investigation and possible prosecution. So possibly the presidency is happy with the role he played and is still playing, but is not happy with the role some of the other service chiefs, maybe the Chief of Defense Staff, played, and that's why there have been changes. But all these are at the level of speculation. But the timing certainly reinforces some of the rumors of the last 1 week.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. I don't know if we've got Mr. Nwagwu right. He's in our off-site studio, and we're trying to see if we can hook him up. But let me come back to you then, Mr. Mohammed, because in the context of what Mr. Jega was just saying, this decision to remove the Chief of Defense Staff and other service chiefs is heavy with significance.
Well, while you don't have to, yes, of course, like Jega said, it's the realm, or it has fortified the rumor mills more on exactly what is happening, even though the defense headquarters have gone to deny, which is, of course, is usual with government in these parts of the world. But the truth of the matter is that why didn't it happen a year ago? But of course, and why the timing? So I think that the president has the absolute right, and of course, constitutionally has been empowered to change his team as at when due and when he thinks the occasion is appropriate. So I'm sure that I'm just surprised the handlers of the president will have just come clean and say, we did this because we know exactly, we heard that there were some infractions, and that's all. And of course, everything is about preservation of democracy anyway.
Yeah, well, you were, of course, the publicity chief at the National Assembly at one point. You would be in a position to know why that kind of thing is never made public.
Well, Charles, I don't speak for government, so
I know you don't, but at one point you did.
Yeah, I
speak for the
understand.
National
I
Assembly.
understand. Sometimes, of course, it's just the floor management. Of course, talk about audience management, and of course, maybe that's exactly why they decide to do that. But I would have just, if I were in their position, is just to let not every detail will be left out, but of course, you will just bring out the silent points. And of course, Nigerians are very intelligent people, and whatever you do, you should be sure that some Nigerians are some steps ahead of us.
Right. Okay, let me go to our off-site studio and hope that Mr. Nwagwu can hear me. Can you hear us? I hope so. Nod vigorously if you can.
Yes, Charles, I can hear you.
Brilliant. I don't know if you've heard the rest of the conversation going on here, but as briefly as you can so that we can move on. Can it be said, because I think Mahmoud Jega was making that point peripherally a minute ago, can it be said that this reshuffle suggests that the president is trying to get on top of the never-ending insecurity crisis in this country?
Well, that's a possibility, but the bigger question will be, like a colleague there said, the timing and what it speaks about the fragility of our current democratic experience. The scare that unveiled last week, and then the reshufflement that we have seen currently, points to the fact that there is something unsettling, clearly unsettling around government and the challenges of governance that the country currently faces. But whether these changes will nip all of that in the bud, only time will tell. There are not exactly new people in the saddle. Most of these, the appointees and the ones that are there are actually people who have played or currently playing one role or the other. They didn't come from outside. In some sense, these are top military security brass themselves. So they need to come to the saddle and see what they bring to the table. But I think it is about self-preservation. I think it is much more also about how to ensure that the regime continues to stay as much as it wants to. But clearly, it's a test to the fragility of our current democracy.
Well, let's move on, because this week there have been calls in the National Assembly for amendments to the Electoral Act that will strengthen the transparency of Nigeria's elections. And many of those calls have emphatically been about the necessity for electronic voting and the electronic transmission of results. And as the debate on the Electoral Act amendment got underway in the Senate this week, some senators were also stressing the need to shift the burden of proof in electoral matters so that the Electoral Commission INEC bears the responsibility of proving that the election it conducts are in conformity with the laws, guidelines and rules, rather than leaving that burden to the contestants. Let me come to you, Mahmoud Jega. So the new electoral bill has now passed second reading. I mean, from what you've seen of the debate, I mean, does it look like the National Assembly will vote to repeal the current Electoral Act and enact the new one that's being proposed?
Well, usually after every general election, based on observations of successes and problems. All kinds of suggestions come, usually from the Independent National Electoral Commission itself, to make some changes. I don't know to what extent some of these proposed changes are coming from INEC. Some of them, like electronic voting, we have been discussing it in this country for at least the last 10 years. But given the problems we have with infrastructure in this country, it could actually cause more problems than it will solve, in my opinion. And then there are also some proposals that look very suspicious, like saying instead of February, March, we should have the elections in November, 6 months before the handover. I think that will be quite messy, to have a president-elect or governors-elect sitting idly for 6 months waiting to take over. I don't think that is a very good suggestion.
And Mr. Mohammed, you were a member of both the 7th and 8th National Assemblies, and you were a member of the Constitution Review Committee in that time. Are you one of those now calling for the National Assembly to tighten the screws on the Electoral Act?
Obviously, because the soul of every democratic process is the Electoral Act. And as it stands today, Section 65 of the Electoral Act, specifically talking about transmission of results, the presiding officer would transmit results either manually or electronically. I have a problem with that. It should end it on only electronically. We have the facilities to do that. I want to disagree with my brother Jega to say that what do you need to transmit results other than internet? And of course, there are fast-moving internets that are in the space, and that can take. It can be sorted out in any part of any village, any hamlet in Nigeria. So I think it's about will, and the way to get every election and getting results properly, and to get our democracy entrenched, where rigging and of course all other biases are curbed, is the transmission of results from each polling unit. The presiding officers will make it available, and it will be on live. It will be live, real time. The ARIV, what is wrong about the ARIV? Manual should be cancelled off the Electoral Act. If Mr. President is actually very serious. This is the first time we're having a former legislator, and he says he's a Democrat and a progressive. So he needs to just typify it, display it, by inserting and of course expunging the manual. The 21st century, nobody uses the manual in elections conduct. What you do is electronically transmitted. In some places they have election kiosk. Election kiosk is like the ATM machine. You fix your voter's card, and of course you have the symbols of the party. When you punch, it's already in the server.
Indeed. And Mr. Nwagwu, in our off-site studio, you were until recently the chairman of the group Partners for Electoral Reform. What's your assessment of the work that's going on at the National Assembly with this Electoral Act amendment?
Well, quite clearly, I think first and foremost that we are very much people in a hurry. The current amendment, the 2022 amendment, had its first birthday on February 25th of 2023. And so it was only 1 year old when we used it to conduct the 2023 general elections. There could be issues that arose out of the 2023 election. We have to be very clear whether those issues can purely be cured by legislative intervention or by attitudinal change. So leaning much more on the challenge that most of the problem are basically attitudinal than law. But having said that, Mr. Mohammed in the studio there talked about electronic transmission of results. Fortunately, what we have now is upload of results. And that is not what the challenge is. The challenge is electronic collation of results, because already these results are uploaded electronically. The INEC results viewing portal is there and is still available right there where you are in the studio now. If you have the link, you can go to IREV and check the results that were uploaded in 2023. So the big issue has not been upload of results. The big issue has been collation, real-time collation of those results. So if there is any amendment, it has to be clear that what you are talking about. If you are still talking about upload of results, that has already happened. Upload of results has already happened. Where the challenge is, and the politicians, through their agents, the party agents of those political parties, have manual copies of those results. The security has manual copies of those results that are eventually uploaded. So the indolence of the politicians is what the IREV is trying to cure. But it is not actually meant for the politicians. It is actually meant to strengthen the integrity of INEC's own processes. So, but what happened was that they gave us a template that there were, because of what we saw as glitch, that it meant that there was problem with the transmission of results. The upload does not. That IREV is not a collation machine. It is simply a checker. It is a checker for both the politicians who are involved in the election and the independent election management body itself. Meaning that if the political parties have challenges with the results that have been mined from the polling units, they can come to collation with the results from the polling units. Not verbal, not evidence-based, is the results from that polling unit, and say, look, the results we mined from the polling unit is not what we have in the uploaded results in the results viewing portal. And then there can then be a cross-checking. But without that complaint, what happens is that the nature of our political class is one in which many of them do not have agents. Many of them, even when they have agents, those agents are transactional. They come to the place not as party members, but as people who have been paid, and immediately after elections, they take those results and go home. And they now sit back, holding the results in the pocket. The politicians sit back and say, oh, results have not been uploaded. The results that you already have in your pocket. So we should be talking to National Assembly to clearly talk about collation of results.
I hope you are talking to the National Assembly, because, I mean, that's part of why you were the chairman of the Electoral Reform Group. I mean, that's the whole idea, that we count on people like you to put these very good points you're making across to them and lobby them to make sure that they take it into consideration. Well, let's move on, because we've only just got a couple of minutes or so left, sadly. Let's move on to our final story, because this was a week in which the detained IPOB separatist leader Nnamdi Kanu featured prominently in everything from a protest march to try to prevail upon the Tinubu administration to free him, to the separatist leader's decision to fire his entire legal team and represent himself in court in what appears to be a tactical move. Let me come to you, Mahmood. What are your thoughts on the events of this week as they relate to Mazin Nnamdi Kanu? Quite a lot of things going on.
Well, lots of things. The most dramatic was the firing of his legal team, apart from the demonstration, and taking over the defense himself. I don't know whether he is a lawyer. If you are not a lawyer, honestly, will you be able in our court system to call witnesses, lead them in testimony, and also cross-examine witnesses from the other side? So, you saw what happened today on Friday when he was asked to open the defense. I think he said he didn't get file from his former lawyer. On the whole, you get the impression that the strategy is a delaying tactic, but there is a limit to that, because the judge said you have got, I think, 8 days to mount your defense, and the days are running. So although I'll give you up to Monday, but I'm not increasing the number of days. So it looks to me like a fairly dangerous tactic. I say that when I remember what happened during the trial of Kensa Ruwiwa and the other Ogoni leaders. Midway into the trial, their lawyers, led by J.O.K. Ajayi, withdrew and allowed them. And that turned out to be fatal. Apart from Ledo Miti, who was a lawyer and defended himself, and he got off the hook. But others were. So the strategy of dismissing lawyers in the middle of the case and taking over the defense yourself could be a dangerous tactic.
Right. Okay, let me come to you, Mr. Mohammed. The aim, I mean, you had protests this week, was to effect his release from detention, or at least to move the dialogue in that direction. But given that not only have the organizers of the protest been arrested, but Mr. Kanu has decided this week to unilaterally fire his legal defense team, could it all backfire?
Yeah, I think so. If he's not a lawyer, I don't know his background. But of course, it's the first time that people have chosen to represent themselves. Chief Obafemi Awolowo did. Olisa Agbakoba did. Showore did too. I don't know whether Showore is a lawyer. Chief MQ Abiola, at some point in his 1993, tried to defend himself. The only, just like Jega said, the issue there is that as the law gets very complex, how can you be able to handle professionally some of these procedures in court? And of course, that could be very, very that could be negative on his part. And of course, I'm sure he did that out of passion. But by and large, I think that there must just be a political solution to this issue. Yes, the law will take its course, it will run, because the IPOB movement has been franchised, and that's why you see boys have taken it over and masquerading themselves and doing all manner of things. But of course, with a political solution, I'm sure that people will sit on the table and let's discuss this issue.
Right.
Don't forget that President Yar'Adua decided that amnesty should come because not only getting the boots on the ground solves the problem. Some amount of some dialoguing could let us.
Let me come to you in the offside studio, Mr. Nwagwu, very, very briefly, and I emphasize the word briefly because we're out of time. How do you expect this long-running Nnamdi Kanu saga to end?
Well, I think that protest is an inalienable right. I think those who are protesting should be allowed to protest in a peaceful manner, and they should be granted protection. I think the crackdown is unnecessary and could only exacerbate the situation. But the drama in court is unnecessary. I think that the young man should allow his legal team to do the job that they are supposed to do and see how they can get him off the hook if they can.
Okay. On that note, and I appreciate your being very brief there, I want to thank all of you very much indeed. Nwagwu is the Executive Director, Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, or PAACA. Zachary Mohammed, I should say Honorable Zachary Mohammed, was the Chairman of the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs and member Constitution Review Committee in the 7th National Assembly. He was also in the 8th. And of course, Arise News analyst and former chairman of the editorial board of Daily Trust newspaper, Mahmoud Jega. Thank you very much indeed.